like to welcome everyone out to our Leighton City Council meeting this evening. It's February 17th, 2022. And once again, I apologize for the delay. It seems like each time we get more and more information to cover in our work meeting. And so it's critical that we were able to do that. So for this purpose, we will now open up our council meeting. And as customary, we always do a prayer and a pledge, and each council member takes a turn at this. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Councilmember Roberts.
First of all, if you'd please rise, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Heavenly Father, we express gratitude to Thee at this time for the opportunity to gather together here as citizens, as friends, as staff, as leaders of this city. We are grateful for the opportunity we have to live here in this great community. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy and for those who work every day to protect those freedoms. We're grateful for the opportunity to discuss important matters of the city at this time, and we pray that Thou will guide us to make wise decisions and keep in mind the far reaching to each corner of our city which we live in. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Tyson. Okay, Council, we do have 3 sets of minutes that we need to approve. Do any of you have any corrections with the minutes that were in your packet? Okay. Seeing that there's no corrections, then I'd look for a motion to adopt the minutes. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and read them as they are on our agenda.
I move we adopt the minutes of September 2nd, 2021, October 7th, 2021, and December 16th, 2021.
Well, second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt the minutes of the meetings. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 2, which is our municipal announcements. And I'm sure we've got a few of those, perhaps our Parks and Rep liaison.
Yes, from the Parks and Recreation Department, we have 3 events next month in March. First of all, March 18th is Wear Green at Surf and Swim from 6:45 to 8:45 p.m., half off admission when you wear green. And so that's it for that one. Also on March 18th at the Central Branch Library, there will be a family recreation evening with a readathon, Dr. Seuss family night, and other fun activities. So cost is free. So bring your family 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the library. And April 11th, there will be an Easter egg dive and game night. It's going to be from 6:45 to 8:45 p.m. at Surf and Swim also. Cost is $2 per child under 14.
Good. Sounds like we got some fun events happening again. Does anyone else have any announcements? I'll just once again promote our museum. We have a great display over there right now. Annie, our curator, has a extensive collection of William Allen's design, who was a major home builder here in the early settlement of our city. She's got a lot of the architectural plans, some of the ledgers and that, and it's really kind of an interesting display. So if you want to spend just half hour, 40 minutes, it's a great display to look at, as well as other things in that museum. So again, hats off to Annie and the commission and the committee over there that helps her. Okay, we'll move on then to, we do not have any verbal petitions. So we'll go ahead and move on to our citizens' comment at this time. So if any of you in the audience wish to make a comment before us that on an item that is not on the agenda, now keep in mind our consent items, typically we do not take public comment on. However, we do have a public hearing. So if your item is under that public hearing, we will allow you to speak at that time. So anything else, you're welcome to come up to the podium and please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, esteemed Mayor, City Council, and the entire Leighton support team. My name is William Campbell, and first I just wanted to thank you. My family's been blessed by all the great things that the community has put forth, and I'm now in the process of looking as a chance to return the good favors and make the community better. I will be running for a political office this year, and I just wanted to declare my intentions in case you see me in the streets or happen to cross paths. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and good luck. Does anyone else have any comments?
Tom Tudor, 1757 Gregory, Leighton, Utah, 84041, for the people. I just want to say this a couple of words because I've been watching the Russians, the Americans, the Germans, the Poland, and everybody, because I was in the military for 20 years, 20. And I was even in Germany when we had the Berlin Wall. And Ronald Reagan came over there and told him what to do. So now I just want to credit the 419 TAC Fighter Wing of Hill Air Force Base. And then you have the 508. And they have already left over there, flying over my houses. And I was glad to see that. But our first squadron is over in Germany right now, preparing for the war. And I prepared my wife and children and everything and gave them some history lessons while all this is going on. Because I was alive when we had the Vietnam War. And I don't want to see this all messed up. Let's go from A to Z and be done with it. And I just wanted to say anybody that's in here that's been in the military, then I personally thank you, and I'm sure the mayor and the city council thank you too, because the next week is going to be different than this week. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tudor. Okay, anyone else wish to speak on an item not on the agenda? Okay, very good. We'll go ahead and move on then, and we appreciate those in attendance tonight. We've got several consent items here, and as you know, these items are presented, and as the governing body here within the city, we can actually act upon these items in one single motion, unless one of them is removed for some reason. So I haven't heard of any discussion to remove any items, so I'm just going to go ahead and proceed in order. We'll start out first off with item number 8, and our city attorney, Gary Crane's going to present that for us.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Let me just move this down here. So item A on the agenda is the appointment of the Utah Telecommunications Open Infrastructure Agency, which is Utopia. To that board, it is an appointment of Zach Bloxham.
Okay.
And previously it was held by Clint Morris, and it's time for circulating that back through again. So Resolution 22-10 is the mayor's advice, or it's the mayor's appointment, and the advice and consent of the council is what it provides for.
Okay.
Thank you.
We appreciate that, Clint. We appreciate your service on that. And I think it's good to just kind of mix it up. And so everybody gets a chance to learn on different topics. So, Zach, thank you.
Am I allowed to, should I vote on this or should I abstain?
You can vote.
Okay.
That was part of our previous meeting on our training.
Unless you're being paid a lot of money.
Try it.
But I know how that goes.
It won't do you any good, but you can vote.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on then to our next item, which is item B. And Mr. Dave Price is going to present that item to us. It's regarding the Parks and Rec Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 2208. If approved, this resolution will reappoint the existing members of the Parks and Recreation Commission for an additional 3-year term. Mayor Joy Petrel recommends the reappointment of C.J. Benson, Angela Richards, and Michael Scott Quinney as members of the Parks and Recreation Commission with the term ending February 1st, 2025. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2208, reappointing these individuals as members of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I'd personally like to thank all of the members of the commission for the time and energy they choose to spend helping our department, city, and the residents of Leighton. Any questions?
Council? Okay, I appreciate that. And these folks do a tremendous job for us. And I know that they spend a lot of time that is on their own time, not necessarily in just the monthly meetings, but we call upon them to help us on a lot of different events that take place throughout the city. So yeah, my hat's off to all of them, as well as anybody else on the other commissions as well. We desperately and sincerely appreciate their service. So thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number C, and Mr. Chad Wilkinson is going to present that item. It is regarding our Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is a proposed appointment to the Planning Commission. We have, of course, with Councilmember Roberts' recent election to the City Council, there's a vacancy that's arisen in our Planning Commission. The Planning Division, along with the mayor and a committee composed of some of our city council and current planning commissioners, met with some great applicants. We had 4 of those applicants that we met with individually, and each of them were very, very qualified. We were very impressed with the folks that applied. Always a difficult decision to have to make in those cases. After those meetings and consultation with the committee, the mayor is proposing that our existing planning commissioner, Chris Crowder, be appointed as a commission member. He's currently serving as an alternate commission member, so he would leave and serve as a full commission member. And then that alternate vacancy would be filled by Scott Carter. And many of you are familiar with Scott Carter, who served in various capacities in the city as well as in the city council recently. So with that is the mayor's recommendation. And this particular appointment requires the advice and consent of the city council, but we are, along with the mayor, recommending approval of Chris Crowder as as a full member of the Planning Commission, and Scott Carter as an alternate member of the Planning Commission.
Anyone have any discussion?
So when these are seated, do they start over at a full 3 years when we seat a new planning commissioner?
Thanks. That's a great question. No, these will be fulfilling terms. So there are terms that are set. These particular individuals will be fulfilling terms. Sometimes those terms are in our code. It specifies that if someone's fulfilling a less than 1 year term, then they're eligible for a full additional 3 terms. If they're fulfilling a term that's more than a year, though, they'd just be eligible for that term plus 2 more.
Okay. I've had this question before, but I've never asked it, and maybe I don't know if it's our bylaws for our planning commission, but I understand that when it's an elected office that it needs to be up for re-election when the term ends, but where it's an appointed, is it an option that we could give the person an opportunity to serve the full 3 years do we need to have those refilled every 3 years?
One of the challenges that we have, just as with the elected positions, is that those positions need to be staggered so that we don't have all those positions needing to be renewed at the same time. So because of that, it is difficult to give everyone a full 3 years. However, again, you're considered to have served a full term if you serve more than 1 year. So those that are filling terms that are less than a year would be eligible for that full three terms.
Good question. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, but remain standing. We got a few items here that Chad's going to cover for us, which item number D, which is a plat amendments or amended plat. So do you want to go ahead and present that to us?
Thank you. Yes, this first, again, Council and Mayor, this first application is an amendment to a subdivision. This is the Indian Springs Creek subdivision. The subject property is shown there in red. The two properties are located at 1329 East Indian Springs and 161 South Indian Springs Drive. This is the property shown outlined in red. Currently, this property is made up of two distinct lots. There's a property line, I'll show you that in just a moment, that goes about right through there. These lots are double fronting lots, one of them even a triple fronting lot that front on Indian Springs Circle, Indian Springs Drive, and Rosewood. The proposal would be to take those two lots that currently exist and create three. So you'd have one additional new lot from those two. This is a copy of the existing plat. I'm outlining one of those two lots with my cursor. The other is here. Again, those two lots currently straddle the creek that exists there in that location. And the proposal would be to modify that to create an additional lot to the north of that creek along Rosewood Lane. This is the proposed configuration of those proposed lots. Anytime we have a flood zone or those types of creek areas within these lots, we do require the creation of a restricted lot, which that R designation shows on the plat, and gives some restrictions for those lots related to the development on those parcels. One thing that was very important to us is to make sure that this was actually a buildable parcel that we were creating. So the applicant has shown that, demonstrated that through a drawing that shows the type of house that could be built, meeting all the setbacks, including setbacks from the Davis County flood control easements and the flood zones and the various public utility easements. This is just the elevation of what that proposed home could look like on that site. Again, this is an issue related to floodplain. We had some question about the floodplain. The floodplain maps have changed. These various dotted areas and crosshatch areas represent the various areas of the flood plains. The real question here is this floodway. That's where the most, I guess, the highest chance for flood occurs. Areas outside of that are included in the flood zone, but are areas that can be built on with proper flood proofing and elevation certification. So with that, we have reviewed this with the Planning Commission as well. They send their recommendation of approval, and we are also recommending that the City Council approve this proposed subdivision amendment. Be happy to answer any questions if I can.
So Chad, that the floodplain, or I guess it's the 100-year flood plan, was just recently reviewed and updated. So this map here reflects that, right?
Yeah, this last one that I showed reflects that. And again, it's the significant change here is that floodway, which is that highest percent chance of flood. That's got some very strict regulations. But these flood plain areas, they're known as Zone A's. They're areas that are still prone to flooding, but that can be mitigated through construction techniques and through elevation certification of the structure.
Okay. Thank you. Council, do you have any questions regarding this?
You said they can be built on with certain actions to make it safe. Can you explain what those are? And background, I'm familiar with property on Kays Creek, and can you go back to that floodplain? That one right there. So where it kind of balloons up, that reminds me of certain areas on Kays Creek where that has washed away. And so I'm a little concerned about building a home that close to the floodplain area, but can you explain what kind of work is done to prevent that?
Yeah, the certification requirements require that the first floor area be elevated a foot above that base flood elevation. So they're going to have to do that to begin with. Those areas that are within those floodplains, for areas that are not habitable, not finished floor area, you can have things like louvers, other things that can be done. I don't know exactly what would have to be done on this particular parcel. That's going to be part of their development approval. But those are the types of things that can be done to mitigate some of those flood impacts. In this case, it could be just as simple as elevating it above that base flood elevation.
I guess my concern isn't flood as much as erosion and the ground being washed away. So is there precautions that have to be made to shore up the sides of the creek?
If that's an issue in that particular area, it comes down to what the creek's doing in the area. Sometimes you'll have a place where a creek is making a sharp bend and those velocities and the potential for wash away is higher than in an area where a creek's just going in a straight line. So as part of their development of the parcel, they'll have to show us that they can safely build there and the proper elevation certifications and any floodproofing techniques they have to do.
Okay.
Any other questions here? Okay, typically we don't take comments from the public on a consent item. I kind of stated that before the meeting. However, however, I don't want to disregard your comments, so I'll entertain one here if you'd want to step up to the mic and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Mr. McNair. I live at 1329 Indian Springs Circle, and I've lived there for about 25 years. And there is a flood problem. That creek might come down like this, but it comes across and washes out the property on the side they want to build in. Our main concern, myself and my neighbor, is if they're going to put in a retaining wall big enough to keep the water going down through the flood channel, because in the notch that showed up on the top there, that's where it all washed out. It's all real low. Okay. He tried, the people wanted to go ahead and build a building or a house on it years and years ago, and the city turned them down. Okay. All this time, this fella that owns the land owns that whole thing as one plot of land. I only own out to the center of the creek, and the neighbor next door only owns out to the center of the creek. So it's actually already 3 lots. He held that part back for all these years. And we have a concern that if it is a house built in there, that it's a single level, it does have a floodplain. It'll have a basement would flood easily in that area. And that's why they put in the big culvert type thing. So that's our main concern, is it's, that they'll have enough secure land to go ahead and build on first off and keep the water going down without washing it out. Because we have had some severe floods through there in times.
Okay.
So that's our main concern. We don't care about the property being into another piece of property. It's the idea of what's going to be built there and if it's going to be safe and be good enough for the creek so it doesn't go ahead and wash out and give the person that might be in that house concerns, or the city concerns. Because the city has come out there a few times just to clean out all the stuff that came down through creek, just so the thing wouldn't flood out anymore.
Okay.
So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I could just really quickly address maybe some of those concerns. On the plat map, if I can go back to that plat map, this large swath of ground through the middle of those properties is a Davis County flood control easement. That'll still be in place. That'll still be enforced. The home will have to be built outside of that. That's centered on the creek. It's a large swath of ground, gives the ability to go in and maintain the property should there be a flood event. That's likely where the highest likelihood of flooding would occur should there be a flood in that area. These maps that we showed you are a little bit, the scale of these, it's a little bit hard to tell those buildable areas. But if you look at that, again, that flood control easement, your creek's going to be essentially centered within those easements, and it give plenty of room for vehicles, for maintenance equipment, et cetera, to get inside of there. As we noted, they will have to meet flood-proof standards to build this. That's wise on their part. It's a requirement as well. They're going to have to meet base flood elevation height that is identified in the engineering memos for this particular lot. They'll have to have a finished floor elevation as indicated by our engineering division. That'll have to be noted on the plat. That'll have to be approved and shown that it meets that base flood elevation requirement. And so because of those changes, the recent changes in the floodplain, our engineering department did feel that this was a lot that could have a buildable area on it now, and that could go through those processes to refine and get to that point where we could approve it.
Thank you.
If they build what they need to build to stop it, what happens to the guy next to him?
All of that's going to have to be.
Going to funnel everything through, which is fine, and you're protecting that land. Then when you get to Bob's place next to it, is that going to?
So there are standards in place that protect from that type of a damage to an adjacent property.
Okay.
They're going to have to show that what they're doing does not raise the flood on the adjacent properties, the flood potential.
Yeah.
So all of that's in existing regulations. They're not discretionary. They're administrative standards that have specific requirements in order for them to build on that lot that ensure that the actions that they take, they're going to have to be reviewed by our engineering department, their own engineers, to make sure they don't negatively impact those adjacent properties. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Hey, Chad, I just have one question. Just for clarity, the two lots that are current, you can go back to the picture that shows what's currently there. These two lots are currently owned by the same person, correct?
They're owned. I'm trying to remember on this one. We have two different amendments. I think this is the one that's owned by the same individual. Let me just double check that on our staff report. Yes, the same individual owns both of those lots.
Okay, so, and what we would be voting on today is for these to be split, not for anything else to be happening. As you've already mentioned, if anything's going to be built, all that is separate because that's development. This is to separate the lots.
Yeah, so it'd be taking this property, going back to this picture, taking these two and making a third back here. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, as is shown on that plot. 1, 2, 3. Yep, that's right.
Okay, so separating from 2 into 3, that's it. Anything that has to happen after that development, that is a whole separate process.
Try to be subject to local, state, and federal law. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just one question, Madam Mayor, if I may. Gary, it's an administrative decision. It doesn't really have a lot of discretion for us.
It is. It's a subdivision approval, so yes.
Okay. So the staff's recommending it because they've met the requirements that are required by law. And we're not guaranteeing that the home will be built. All we're doing is they've dotted the T's and dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and they'll have to do that sooner or later. So I appreciate the comments from the neighbors who've lived there because I think that's important. But if they've met all the requirements, then we don't have a lot of discretion, but it's going to be on them to make sure it's built to the proper way so that it can be a place of habitation. So I appreciate your comments, sir.
Okay. We good? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. You have one more item yet to present to us. So if you want to...
The next item is also a subdivision amendment. In this case, where it's essentially a property line adjustment because this crosses two different subdivision boundaries. We are here looking at this. The two subdivisions we're talking about are Willow Cove Estates Phase 2 and Whispering Willow Estates Phase 4. This again is the location there on the map with the red dot showing that location. Here's a zoning map showing that property outlined in red with the cross hatching. These are two lots again shown here in red. I want to show just the adjustment very quickly. So this is the northernmost of those two parcels. This adjustment would take the property line that runs approximately right here now and bump it to this location. It's a fairly small adjustment. Same thing would happen in the inverse on this side, bumping that property line down. The primary purpose for this amendment, these are two maps that show the existing lots in the subdivisions that they exist in. But the primary purpose of this, if I can go back to this, is, and it's a little bit difficult to see on this particular map, but if you look at the way the property line runs, it comes up into this property. And if there was to be a future fence built along this property line, it would be a difficult thing. It would essentially put a fence in front of this person's home. So the idea is to adjust that property line so that future fence, probably you can see it a little bit better here. If you were to run that fence, that fence would essentially run in front of this home. The desire of the property owner is to adjust that so that a future fence would not come up in front of the home, but would just run along the side property line of their neighbor. And so this, again, is essentially a property line adjustment. It does go through this amendment process because these are on two separate subdivision plats. This has been reviewed by staff and by the Planning Commission, and both recommend approval of this I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions, council?
So Bob on the bottom, he's okay with this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Both of these are co-applicants in this. Yep. A lot of Bobs.
I think this is a good example how neighbors can resolve their own problems, which is kind of good. So I might commend the neighbors there for working this out. Any other questions? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
So you are finished, and now we get to hear from Mr. Long Crowell, sorry, on the compatible use plan. So, come on.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let me get this up. I'm here to present tonight to you Resolution 2216 and 2217. 2216 is a resolution to accept the Hill Air Force Base compatible use plan and endorse the implementation strategies identified in the plan. And Resolution 2217 is a resolution endorsing the formation of the Hill Air Force Base Compatible Use Implementation and Coordination Committee. These are tied together, so I'll present them as one item. And I'll basically be giving you a brief history. It's hard to see the screen with the flag in the way up there, but you can see this has been quite a journey. This started in the spring of 2018 when the former mayor, Bob Stevenson, and former community development director, Bill Wright, and I met with Jay Sweat. Jay Sweat is a representative from what is now the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation and was previously the Office of Economic Adjustment. And he explained to us the opportunity to obtain a grant for the compatible use plan. A compatible use plan, the purpose of a compatible use plan is to identify the conflicts between the base mission and its surrounding communities and come up with strategies to mitigate those conflicts so we can ensure the longevity of the base. Following that, in July of 2018, the City Council passed Resolution 1850, supporting the application towards that grant. It took some time to coordinate with all of those involved, which I will be showing you in the next couple slides. And we were able to hold a meeting in October with the elected officials of, at the time, 10 cities and 2 counties, along with some city managers and their staff. And they overwhelmingly decided to move forward in that meeting after it was presented to them by Jay Sweat at that time. We went through a process. I formed some committees, volunteers from the participants, the surrounding committees, and put together an RFP and a scope. The RFP and scope were 38 pages long, and they covered these 7 primary goals that you can see on your screen. Those were the things that we were interested in that they identified in the plan and provided strategies for. In July of 2019, we were awarded the grant through the Department of Defense for $384,641. There's a local match of 10%, which the participating communities and us shared. And in addition to that, the Utah Defense Alliance provided $5,000 towards that match. They were instrumental also in the process up to this point in time. In December of 2019, Matrix Design was awarded a contract by the City Council through Resolution 19-56. And finally, in February of 2020, we had a kickoff meeting in Clearfield with the elected representatives, including the city councils from, at that point in time, 12 different cities and 2 counties still. And it went well. And then you all know what happened immediately after that. COVID put a lot of things on halt. Matrix, our consultant, did a great job by turning a lot of the meetings and things that were supposed to happen in person virtually, and they were able to continue that process. Since that time, we've held 18 meetings. 3 of those were public hearings where they took public comment. They held 47 stakeholder interviews. These are everybody. We were involved as our city, the mayor, the city manager, the city attorney, and the department heads for public works, community development, and engineering, along with the fire chief and the police chief as well, to give them our thoughts of items that we were concerned about that could be addressed through this process to help, mostly with communication for us, but some other items that we thought might be a concern that we could address through this process. At the end, through this process, you can see that we have 12 cities that were involved and 3 counties, and they're identified there. This is a list that's not complete, but it gives you an idea of who was involved, and it was pretty substantial. Not only we had representatives from Hill Air Force Base, but we had our federal delegation, several of them. They weren't able to comment. They're not allowed to through this process because of the federal grant money, but they sent staff to basically be in the room and take notes and communicate. But we had state legislators that were involved. And then we had many groups from the state down to local involved in this process. We also had local employers involved in this process. And then we had several adjacent landowners and residents and others that were concerned about things that are identified in the plan. So that's kind of a wrap up of the process that took place to create this 372-page plan that's very comprehensive. It was a creation from everybody involved. Matrix did a great job of getting them to collaborate and to bring all that information together. It was not an easy task bringing that many elected and appointed officials and all the others together for multiple meetings, but it was definitely a great opportunity. For 2217, now that we have a plan in place, it has no regulatory authority. So the next step is to go through the process to implement the plan. And that's where there will be processes for many years to come from the city council and the city and the residents to decide how we want to go about that process. There's recommendations in the plan. As mentioned, there's 110 recommendations for 43 concerns that were expressed. That doesn't mean we can't come up with our own as well in addition to those or with those. And so that will be the process coming forward. So Resolution 2217, recommended by our consultant, is to create an implementation coordination committee with the several communities and other stakeholders involved. A lot of that involves setting up better communication between us and the base and surrounding areas. We do a pretty good job, but there's always room for improvement. There's other cities that don't communicate as well. So this is a really good opportunity for us to create that process where we can all communicate better. But that's just one of many of the opportunities that have come through this process. If you drive around Hill Air Force Base, you'll see that they're starting to actually implement some of the items that are discussed in the plan. So this is a good thing between us, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. And so with that, staff, we recommend that the City Council consider adopting and accepting Resolution 2216 and 2217 as submitted. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Council, I know we went over this a little bit in our work meeting, but certainly you have an opportunity here to ask any additional questions you might have. Mr. Morris?
Yeah, just actually more of a comment. Thank you for spearheading this and for us being the chief sponsor. That was smart as well. We're grateful for we want to be good neighbors, and the base wants to be a good neighbor. And this goes, I mean, this is vitally important as we move forward as far as planning for that good relationship between the base and Leighton City. I mean, these are, so many families live here and benefit from the base. We learned earlier that, and this isn't new information, but the base is a $4.5 billion economic driver for the state, for the region, obviously for Leighton City. So I'm grateful for this plan. I'm excited moving forward. We have to have good relations and a good relationship with the base moving forward, because without community support, I mean, the base can't close. And part of and it's not just, the criteria is not just, how is the community, but it is a factor. It's an input. Are you welcome in your community? Hill Air Force Base is welcome in this community, and I'm excited to support these resolutions tonight and move forward as we plan. So thanks, Lon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The only other thing I'd add that was excellent is that it isn't just the base, it's also the communities around us. I mean, Lon, great job on bringing all the cities together on this, and knowing that going forward, it's going to require all of us working together as well. Even though we can identify our own specifics here within the city, it's a matter of working collectively together. So I'm very much impressed, and you have a lot of tenacity, kid.
I'd echo what's been said. I mean, this is a huge asset, even just the report as it is, to our planning and zoning departments, just as a reference tool. I think it could be a great tool to use in the future. Just one question about the implementation committee. Is there funding needs for that, or is it going to be just on your own, or those who participate are paid in their position they're in?
Yeah, it would be volunteer or paid by the city that they represent, or county, I guess. Up to this point, that's basically how it was operated through this process. Is everyone was invited to participate, and those that were willing to and offered by their community to do so were able to participate. And I would imagine this would continue in a similar manner. We were pretty successful in having representatives from most communities throughout the process, different parts of it anyway. And so it's probably going to be similar to that. It's up to us to decide how we operate, but there's not funding that I know of right now to pay anyone.
I need to comment on that. Didn't Mr. Patrick Small, who is also very instrumental in conducting this, didn't he allude to the fact that there could possibly be additional funding federal funding that we could go after to help?
If that program's funded, then there could be possible funding available, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks again, Lon. I appreciate it. Kind of piggybacking on Councilman Roberts' discussion about potential changes to zoning. And if you can't answer this, that's okay. One of the things I noticed was in the airfield safety zone, they said that we, as the city, could consider amending zoning ordinances to incorporate Department of Defense land use recommendations from a 2018 Hill Air Force Base study. And I guess I was surprised that wasn't already something we were doing, and it may be something we're already doing. But I don't know if you can speak to that or the staff. It was just, I know we've had discussions about what we can do in now those particular areas. I was just curious if we know what those studies are and what those land use recommendations would be. What would the zoning change be? What are they recommending?
Yeah, those are identified in the plan. There's different recommendations from both the FAA and the military based on the airport. All of those are health and safety related. When it comes to us, there's concerns about takings and other things like that. We have to be careful through that process. There might be funding through the DoD. The state might be able to participate like they have in the past to help pay for some easements. And so that won't be an easy process for sure. And that's kind of how that will have to take place moving forward. It will be a public process.
Okay.
Does it change from the BRAC? I mean, is there an addition to BRAC or lessening?
I don't know if I can answer that question.
Because we've gone
They seem
through
to
quite
be, yeah, it's been mentioned they're more favorable to companies that show an intent to protect the interests of a military installation, but that's not, it's impossible for me to answer that question.
I'm not.
So.
If I could just piggyback on what Lon said about the zoning, the plan itself does not make any specific zoning recommendations. It talks about land uses. So it'll say, these are the types of land uses that we have concern. Zoning decisions are firmly on your shoulders. So we have a general plan. That's what we would still continue to use to guide our zoning decisions. And this plan gives all that authority to the city council for the actual zoning and those types of designations.
Yeah, it wasn't to say that they would have land use authority. It was just our general plan is pretty new. And so I was just, I don't know. I guess maybe it's easy for them to write. We need to amend our zoning ordinances when maybe they don't know that we just updated our general plan, and we would probably have those things already in place.
Yeah, and that was looked at during that general planning process with the knowledge that this process was on the horizon. This has been, as Lon said, this has been contemplated for years. So we were adopting our general plan knowing that we were going to have this follow-up process. But there will be many more discussions about what appropriate zones should be within those areas they identified.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, one last question, just because I know it will probably come up, and that is the plan, the availability of this. Where could, if the council decides to adopt this tonight, where would that be available so our citizens can look at it?
We have a project website, which will be up for about a year. You can download a copy of the plan. If you go to www.hillafbcup.com, and you can see the link at that site to download the plan or view the plan. Not only that, but all the information regarding the process and all the documents that took place in the meetings are all there if you would like to review that as well.
Thank you, Lon. And once again, thank you for doing all that you did in leading out on this. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that pretty much concludes our consent items as far as the presentations. So, council, I'll turn it back over to you for action. This will be a doozy. Yay.
We can do this all in one motion.
You can.
All right. I move that the council approve the consent items. I'll read them. Item A, appointment to the Utah Telecommunication Open Infrastructure Agency, Utopia, Resolution 22-10. Item B, appointments to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Resolution 22-08. Item C, appointments to the Planning Commission, Chris Crowder and Scott Carter, Resolution 22-09. Item D, amended plat for Indian Springs Creek Subdivision, First Amendment, 1329 East Indian Springs Circle and 161 South Indian Springs Drive. Item E, amended plat, Willow Cove Estates Phase 2, First Amendment, and Whispering Willows Estates Phase 4, First Amendment, at 684 South, 275 West, and 302 West, 700 South. Item F, accepting the Hill Air Force Base Compatible Use Plan in good faith and endorsing the implementation strategies as identified in the plan, Resolution 22-16. And item G, endorsing the formation of the Hill Air Force Base Compatible Use Plan Implementation Coordination Committee, Resolution 22-17.
Perfect. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved in second that we act in the affirmative on all the items presented. Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing that there's none, I do not have to do a roll call vote on this. So, council, all those in favor of the consent items as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. We'll now move on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. We do have 3 items that are part of our public hearing. So the first one up is about our Community Block Grant Award, and Mr. Morgan Cloward's going to present that for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to give you a brief background on the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG program. This is administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And some of the eligible activities that Leighton City has been participating with the CDBG program include some of our public services, Open Doors, Safe Harbor, Lantern House, Youth Court. We also have housing projects, including our Home Down Payment Assistance Grant. And we also have economic development activities and assistance. The stipulation from HUD with this funding is that these activities must support, benefit low and moderate income persons within the community. The plan that we're talking about tonight that's coming up is the program year that runs from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th of 2023. Our current funding that we're using right now was for Annual Action Plan 2021-2022. And this Annual Action Plan, it outlines how the city will allocate its allotment of CDBG funds during the upcoming program year. And as you can see on the next slide, tonight is our first public hearing for the Annual Action Plan. HUD requires at least 2 public hearings. And the first one, the purpose of that is just to gather feedback and any comments that we might have from the general public and some of our subrecipients and others that participate. And then we also have a second hearing that's required by HUD, and that one typically happens during May. And we also gather more input from the public at that time. And then if everything looks good, then we go ahead and we ask the City Council to adopt that plan. And then just that last slide I have for you is just a rundown, a breakdown of the current activities that we're running right now with the city, including, as I said, homebuyer assistance, down payment assistance. We had a recent Davis School District home that was constructed here in town, where we had students from Davis County School District participate in that. And then you can see some of our public service activities: Open Doors, Safe Harbor, Youth Court, and Lantern House. So that's a quick overview, brief view of CDBG and the upcoming Annual Action Plan. And before, I know we have a few of our subrecipient representatives here that would like to say a few words. I just wanted to open that to you to see if you had any questions for me about this.
Council, do you have any questions before we open it up for public comment?
Yeah. Is that okay, Mayor? Morgan, a couple of questions. Do we know how much it'll be for the next program year?
We don't. We know it's a formula based on employment and, the how healthy the local economy is and other factors. It's typically around the amount you see up there. It hovers up over and below 400,000 typically. So it'll probably be around that range.
So you mentioned that for low to moderate income, how is that determined? And are we moving? When is that determined? Is that a census item, or is that every couple of years or every year where we determine what the income is?
Yeah, so HUD will release those every year. What the household income limits, what they do is they say for a household of 4 or 5, your threshold is this certain amount. And so if I have someone apply for a down payment grant, I have to look at their previous tax return and also some of their pay stubs just to make sure that they're not exceeding that amount, for example.
Is our median income in Leighton City, is it going up?
It is continuing to rise, yeah.
Which means we might get less money. It's not
Yeah, it really depends on how well our local economy is doing. Yeah, in past years where we weren't doing as well, we received a higher allocation.
Last thought is with COVID and the stimulus money hitting the economy and people taking that money and turning around and spending it, the numbers could be overinflated as far as the economy going, as far as what other factors do they look at to keep that from happening, from being overinflated?
I don't know all the specifics, but I do know that we've had some separate COVID funding that we've received from HUD, and I do know some of the requirements, some of the regulations. They have made it to where it's a little bit easier to help your citizens in your community with. For example, with this annual action plan that we're proposing, there's a cap. There's a 15% cap that we have on a limit we can allocate for our subrecipients. With the COVID money, there's not a cap. They suspended that. I hope in part that answers what you're.
Yeah, no, okay. I just maybe for the new council members as well. I appreciate this program and all that you have. I mean, you're a champion of this, and it's not just when you come up here and present and that's all you do. This is hard work, and especially with that COVID money and all of the incentives for small businesses and the families. And I mean, appreciate all that you do in implementing this. And I would imagine the subrecipients do as well. You're just great to work with, and appreciate it, Morgan. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, Council, I'm excited to hear from some of the subrecipients. I see them here, but we need to open up our public hearing at this time. So I'll look for a motion to open the public hearing. Okay, is it seconded? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. So if any of the subrecipients would wish to speak to the topic, please come on up.
Mayor, Council, Open Doors would like to thank you for the past support we've received. I can answer your question about LMI. Low, moderate income people are between 125%, 200% of the federal poverty level. And as Morgan stated, it depends on the size of their family. Average size family in poverty for Leighton City is a single mom with 3 kids. That would put her at about, LMI is $27,000 a year. 200% of the poverty level would put her at about $38,000. So that's what they would have to make in between those to receive services. Open Doors, what a year. We've had a great year. I just want to say thank you, and I want everyone to recognize our staff at Open Doors has worked so hard this year to help everybody in the community. We were granted by the county the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We served over 6,000 families and dished out about $2 million in rental assistance. We were second in the state for having the most applications approved. Then the state went and they've taken it back over. However, Open Doors did such a good job in helping these families. They'd allowed us to keep doing community outreach and helping the community get the word out. So we're very proud of that. Just to inform you, we had our point in time count last month. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's when groups of people get together and go out at 3 o'clock in the morning and count the homeless. We actually had 34 people. 90% of them were from Leighton City. Most of them were found in the Cracker Barrel backyard, in their parking lot there, and Walmart. We did find more than the actual 34, but only 34 would agree to do the survey, and that's all we're allowed to count. How many people we actually count that night is based on the HUD funding we receive from the federal government. So fortunately, we found a lot more than that. They won't do the surveys. We can't help them. Since July 1st, our food bank has passed out 2 million pounds of food. Because of COVID, we can't have actual people come into our food bank. So we have created ways to provide the community with food. We've been doing drops at Department of Workforce Services, different elementary schools, high schools in the area. Big problem is we've seen a 50% decrease in our grocery rescue program. Grocery rescue is where local grocers get together and they pass out food that are kind of like what you see the manager specials. It's a great idea. They come, they drop it off to us. It saves them the money in actually having to throw away the food, and we can pass it out. So we've seen a 50% decrease in that donation. Plus, we've seen an increase in the poundage of food we're giving out. So that creates a huge problem. Again, we still are assisting families with our family support. Because of COVID, we can't take as many families, but we're still seeing a huge demand for the families wanting to use our nursery. So that's where we're at right now with that. Again, I'd like to thank Mayor Petra with her help with Cedarwood. Cedarwood is a mobile home park that is going to be dispersed. As of March 9th, 14 families had to relocate and move. We were able to place all of the families but 2. So that's good news there. So hopefully we only have now 100 other families we have to place in the next couple of years, but good start. I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody has with Open Doors and what we've been doing.
Do you take volunteers?
Yes, we do. We're limited in the number of volunteers we can take and where we can take them right now, but you can go to our website and just put in your name, and we usually, right now, we're taking volunteers to do the food in our food bank.
If we have a group, say 10,
Sure.
that you're still okay?
Yes, we're
We
still.
just go to the website?
Just go to the website and put in your information, and then
Right.
we contact you based on what day you'd like to come. So we can take a group of 10, and you'll be sorting food. And we do take kids as young as about 10, as long as they're with a
These would
parent.
all be junior high, high school.
Perfect. Mhm.
And they, I just lost my train of thought. You talked about how they would, are there any days that are better?
Our food bank, we actually take deliveries. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays,
Okay.
we have our volunteers come in because our food bank is
So
close
that'd be
to
the
the
best
public.
2 days.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay,
And
thank
I
you.
am aware that I think the Leighton Rotary Club is actually going to be up there next Wednesday to
Wednesday
Yeah, well,
night,
help
yeah.
them out.
This is for the youth
Club.
council.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yes, we do. We also, too, we have a Circles program that the youth get involved with, and it's an incredible program. I don't know. Circles is a peer mentoring program where you take low-income individuals and pair them up with middle to upper middle class volunteers. As a matter of fact, I was at Circles tonight. I have a great story. Let's end up on a great story. I teach Big View for our Circles program, and that's about the political process and the importance of voting. So we had this woman that was there, and we were talking about eviction notices and how there's a bill up that's going to expunge people's eviction notices after a year. And she was saying that she had been evicted from her apartment due to a domestic violence issue and could not rent an apartment. She went through Safe Harbor, and they helped her get her apartment, get settled. She's doing so well now, so she's taken the next step to join our Circles program, and she started her own business where she's putting together a book of resources to help other people that have been involved with domestic violence situations. On the money, she wanted to go volunteer with Safe Harbor, but obviously there's a time period that she has to go through the program. But this woman, she actually started crying, saying that she felt so relieved that she found Safe Harbor. She still had a support system within Circles, and she was doing this all on her own with her kids. So thank you for your support of everything that you do.
Thank you. And that's a prime example of two important agencies working together.
Great
So,
story.
thank you. Yeah. Okay, next.
Mayor, City Council, I'm Carlene Kidman with Leighton Youth Court, and I thank you for all your support. We're in our 24th year, and we have heard over 1,850 cases in 23 years. And I'm just going to talk about some of the statistics from last year. 97% of all our cases completed youth court program, and I can tell you why the two that didn't, complete. So. But most of our cases has changed over the last couple of years. Most of our cases now are possession of marijuana. And it's not the old-fashioned marijuana that was when I was a kid a million years ago. It's vaping. And these kids are vaping not only tobacco, but marijuana is pure THC. So that's a whole nother story, but that's most of our cases. We've had so many cases lately that on Wednesday nights we've been running 3 different panels just to catch up. Last night it was the kids kind of went, that's nice, only to go back to 2 panels again. So we've had a lot of cases. We're only in February and we go till the end of June. We've heard more cases than we did all of last year. So we've been getting a lot more cases. Like I said, most of them are marijuana. But I wanted to tell you, talking about poverty stuff, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the offenders from last year, for our statistics. 85% of the offender families are below 50% or more below poverty level. So we are seeing the more poverty. 82% of the offenders have what's called an individual educational plan, which means they're in resource classes. So that's a high statistic that no one else in the state keeps, but that's something that I keep here in Leighton because I've actually had conversations with Davis Behavioral Health about this statistic to see what we can get into to help these youth stay out of trouble. 21% of the cases last year were elementary school kids, with the youngest being in 2nd grade. So some of these, they're starting out younger and younger. 49% of the parents approve of their kids' friends. That means 51% don't. So just so you know. 43% of the youth offenders say 1 to 25% of their friends use drugs or alcohol. 62% of them said they are leaders, so that's good. 41% of the families are single households, and 24% of the families say there is a disability in their family. And 3% say grandparents are raising their children that came to youth court. So that's just some of the statistics that we are trying to help in youth court, trying to help these families and help these youth get back on track. 91% of the cases said that after completing youth court, they are making better choices and they want to move forward and not do what brought them to youth court. So that's a really good statistic that we're really proud of. And one of the, like I said, going on a high note, one of our biggest things this year that I am very, very proud of, our current I call her little because she's just this teeny petite little girl. Our president this year is a former youth court offender. She came through youth court several years ago and has changed her life around, and now she is our current president. And she's very pleased about that, and she will tell you all about it. She's the cutest little thing. So if any of you are ever wanting to come and look what these kids are doing, they're phenomenal and turning around, and actually they care and are trying to help these youth. Come in on Wednesday nights because we're in here doing youth court. And we wouldn't be able to do it without your support. So I would just ask that you continue to help support through this grant so that we can continue doing our program. Do you have any questions?
Council, any questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Carlene, you do a fabulous job. Thank you so much for hanging in there and really
thank you.
Make it. I mean, you represent the city very well.
Thank
and I
you.
appreciate that.
May I, Madam Mayor? Yeah, Carlene, just you give your heart to those kids in this program. It is all of these percentages and 91% of the youth court, they're making better choices. They might not have a 2-parent household, but they got a mom when they go to youth court.
Thank you. One other thing that was really interesting, I went to a meeting yesterday, and one of the gals that was on the agenda to present was one of my former youth court girls. And so now she runs a program in Clearfield High School. So I'm going, hey, remember us? And she goes, yes, I remember youth court. So, it just keeps going around. They come back and they are working in our community. So,
well, they're lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
Can I make a comment, Mayor?
Sure.
Carlene, just sorry. Just my thanks as well for all that you're doing. I think I remember last year there was a question about the funding, and funding was increased. Just make sure that you request enough for what's the right amount, but enough to take care of these kids would be my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kristen Floyd. I'm the Executive Director for Safe Harbor Crisis Center. And for the new council members, that is the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Crisis Center. We are the only service provider in Davis County, and we've been here for 25 years. Unfortunately, over the past couple of years, we've been experiencing an extreme increase in our services needs both prior to COVID and during and because of COVID. To address those increases, we have been going through expansion efforts. Some of you will have noticed we have a brand new building that is almost to completion across from the Intermountain Leighton Hospital that will open up in May. That's our Lifeline and Prevention Center. That facility handles individuals that are not in imminent danger, don't need immediate shelter with our crisis shelter or transitional housing, but will still need services associated with domestic abuse that they've experienced. That might be free therapy for their children, protective orders, advocacy services, sexual assault exams, unfortunately, and other types of advocacy services. We do psychoeducational groups there, healthy relationships, and work with the schools. And that's all housed out of that Lifeline and Prevention Center in Leighton. In addition to that expansion, unfortunately, we will also need to expand our shelter and our transitional housing units. Those are on our Kaysville campus. Right now, we have 31 beds in our shelter. With COVID, unfortunately, it prohibits us from housing people in that shelter the way that we've been accustomed in the past. And so the 31 beds quickly went down to 13. We were already at capacity prior to COVID, and we're always full at that 31 beds. So you can imagine the challenges that we have had through COVID. We've been able to utilize some different hotel situations, and the city and counties have helped us with those funds. However, that's not a safe place for us to put victims. We had an issue a few months ago where the perpetrator found the victim at the hotel, kicked in the door, and took our victim. And so that's clearly not a safe place for us to continue to house them. And so we really do need this expansion in order to provide services to those victims. Our transitional housing apartment complex, we have one located there on our Kaysville campus now. It has 10 apartments in it. We house individuals and families for anywhere from 6 to 24 months. While they're at transitional housing, they receive wraparound advocacy services that is also free, children's advocates, adult advocates, diversity advocates that speak other languages to assist individuals in any capacity that is necessary to get them back to a healthy lifestyle for themselves and their family. We're very grateful for the support of Leighton City over the past few years and are looking forward to utilizing future funds from Leighton City, and we'll be putting in an application for those funds. But just wanted to say thank you for all of your support, not just financial support. I know the mayor's been to a multitude of events, and the others have enjoyed some of those things as well. And we just appreciate that support, both in kind and financial support. So thank you. If there's any questions.
Questions?
Just one question. Could you maybe explain your relationship also with victim services here in Leighton City?
Yeah, so we work, those would be what we call systems advocates, and many of the cities within Davis County have those advocacy services. And so what we're able to do, the difference there, for those of you that don't know the difference between a community advocate and a systems advocate, we are community advocates and we are bound by a VAWA confidentiality requirement. Systems advocates are not, and they work a lot more on the legal side of the advocacy process for those victims, where we are perhaps working on a different side of that would allow us to keep those conversations and situations confidential as they come in. A systems advocate may be bound in court to testify or release information that was discussed, and the community advocate isn't. So that's just the difference. But in conjunction with that, we work heavily with the systems advocates to be able to connect them so that systems advocate can help them on the legal side so that we get justice for them against the offenders that have created the domestic abuse. So we're very grateful for the systems advocates that have been created throughout the county.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have one more.
Hello, I am Shelley Pace. I am here representing Davis Community Housing Authority, and we operate the Emergency Home Repair and Rehabilitation Program. some of the exciting things that have happened lately is that Morgan has expanded the program to allow for water efficiency as well as being more creative in cooling, where, things are heating up pretty substantially. And so trying to think of new ways of seeing that. One of the things that I've noticed is that once people do apply and realize that they can do windows, they go for efficiency windows instead. But so on emergency home repair, it's basically for anything that this is an emergency situation, that they're in danger as far as heating, cooling, water heaters going out. So in those situations, we'll go in and have a contractor go in and replace those so that they can be back to a good condition again. On rehabilitation, that's more about improving the home. So that'll be a lot of the roof repairs or replacements, as well as window replacements to be high efficiency. And those programs, the emergency home repair grant can go up to $3,000, and the rehabilitation is up to $5,000. And I did want to touch briefly on the income limits and AMI. So area median income for Leighton City is within the Ogden declared field established from HUD as far as what that 30, 50, and 80% thresholds are. And so those will be published in a few months, but that's something that just on an annual basis. And it seems like it kind of goes up by around $4,000 to $5,000 for that family size. Seems pretty typical. That's not to say how much would be allocated to Leighton necessarily, but as far as how area median income is determined. And I haven't spoken in front of more than like 2 people in a while. So
You're doing great.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Council, you have any questions? Hey,
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that. And I just want to make a quick comment. I know some of the others have left, but obviously you can see the passion that each one of these representatives have. I mean, they eat, sleep, and drink who they are advocating for, and I'm very impressed with the dedication and don't feel nervous at all.
Thank you. I also wanted to say the Circles program that Open Doors runs is amazing. I've had people come and talk to me about how much their life has changed from that. So just want to call that out.
Thank you. Okay. That's our first item on our public hearing. And being that this is a open program, we're not taking any action on that item tonight, correct? So it's just a matter of public hearing on item A, which was the community block grant plan. So I'll just go ahead and move on to item B. Is that fair? Okay. Let's go on to item B, and Mr. Chad Wilkinson, I believe, is presenting that item for us, which is a proposed amendment to the Leighton City Municipal Code.
Thank you, Mayor. We're just going to take a moment to transition back to our other slide presentation here. Just one moment. I'm not trying to make you car sick here. Sorry for the quick. Don't look at the screen. Yeah. We're going to move past those slides very quickly. So we've talked a lot about this particular amendment in the past with the council at work sessions. This is something that is a standard that goes way back. This is a standard that was adopted in 2002. So it's been on the books for about 20 years, and it was related to landscape buffers along our arterial and collector streets. Now, up on your screen, you can see a great example of what this ordinance was meant to do. This is one of our arterial streets in the city with that landscape buffer in place. You can see the beautification that does, especially along those properties that have their rear yards along that arterial street, and that's what it was meant to do. We have found there are in the ordinance, there are two types of these buffers. One of those buffers are established in common area that's owned by the homeowners association. The other option in our current ordinance is to allow for these types of buffers to be installed within private easements that are part of the adjacent property. Unfortunately, we have found that occasionally, for the most part, we have some version of this out there, a very attractive landscape area, but occasionally we do have buffers that turn out to look a little bit like this on the screen. And that's what we found, is that predominantly in those situations, those are buffers that are not within those common areas, but within those private easements in private properties. Those buffers that are established within common ownership with a homeowners association maintaining those typically are maintained in perpetuity very well with good watering and maintenance of lawns and other things. But with these other options where we have an easement, sometimes that doesn't happen. So there could be a variety of things. Either the buffers are never installed, they're not maintained properly, or that the homeowners association is never fully established or functioning, and that there's discrepancies in how those are maintained. So to address that, we are proposing some changes to our current ordinance. The first of those is that we would no longer allow for those buffers to be established within a private easement. They would have to be in common area that's owned and maintained by a homeowners association. In order for us to facilitate that, and because before the developer or the property owner had the option of providing that within an easement and maintaining that property, we are proposing a minor density increase and some lot averaging in order to make sure that there's no issue with any kind of a takings claim. This would provide for them to have a trade-off in providing this buffer area and avoid any of those types of takings claims for this particular buffer to be installed. We also saw a need for us to strengthen our language related to CC&Rs. That's conditions, covenants, and restrictions that govern the homeowners associations and how these landscape areas are maintained. We also have put in some language that we would call, we've been calling this kind of the last straw language, which is if there's, through all of our efforts, if we're unable to get compliance with these landscape standards, we do have the ability to impose a fee for landscape buffer maintenance. Now, I want to just explain that a little bit. This would not be something where the city would impose a fee and then the city crews would go out and maintain the landscaping. This would be a situation where, much like an HOA, there would be a private landscaping contractor that would be contacted, bids given, and a contract that would be entered into, and then those costs would be passed along to those property owners that are not willing, or for whatever reason are not forming that homeowners association to maintain these landscape buffers. The impacts of that are that this is not intended to be a way for property owners to simply pass that maintenance along to the city. There would be some type of administrative fee that would go along with that. It would function to a great extent as a special assessment district that would be formed for that particular group of properties that could then be formed in order to maintain that very specific improvement. So that's one thing that has come up as we talked through this with the Planning Commission and others, and we wanted to make sure that was clear. Rather than go through all the specific language of the ordinance, we have gone through that with the council a little bit in our previous meeting. Happy to talk about the specifics. I just want to focus on a couple of things. These are the standards that apply to lot averaging. The RS zone, which is our residential suburban zone, already includes the ability to lot average along these arterial and collector streets. We'd expand that out to the R1 zone, and that's, again, in order to try to avoid those issues of takings. This would give those folks the ability to average their lots along those arterial and collector streets and to get a little bit of a density bonus within 300 feet of that arterial or collector road. You can see those numbers. This is something we discussed at length with the Planning Commission, and these are how that works out. Essentially, a half a unit per acre within that first 300 feet of arterial and collector road. We have also, not going to go through this language all in specific, but these are the standards that we've adopted to beef up the language related to our conditions, covenants, and restrictions to make sure that those are strong enough that we can make sure that those are established and that those are maintained after they're established. This also gives the city a seat at the table with those CC&Rs to make sure that they aren't removed after the homeowners association is formed, that the city would be a party to those to make sure they couldn't dissolve the HOA or make changes to modification of that landscape buffer without the city being involved. We do have that language, again, related to imposing a fee. Explained that a little bit earlier. That would include the provision for, in some cases, installation, 1-year warranties, those things to make sure that landscaping is maintained. I want to just mention really briefly that as this has been reviewed by the council, we have had some grammatical changes that have been identified. Those have been included. We did have one additional grammatical change that was identified. Actually, this is not a grammatical change. This is an actual typographical error in one of your tables that's found on page 6 of the ordinance and 82 of the, let me make sure that's 82. Is that correct? Page number 72 of the packet. There's a table 16-1, and there's some erroneous language there. It refers to a section 16 point. Can you give me that section number again? I just page 82. It identifies section 16. Thank you. 16.16.070. It should be 19.16.070. So that was a mistake on the transcription of that code. So we would include that in our motion as well as those typographical and grammatical changes. Be happy to answer any questions. I want to acknowledge right now Weston Apoloni, our city planner, who is the primary author of these changes. I'm going to tag team with him on any questions you may have about the ordinance or any questions that come from the public about the proposed ordinance, and be happy to open that up. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission with actually a continued meeting for further review so they could make sure they understood these provisions. And then they did recommend that the council approve this proposed landscape ordinance amendment.
Okay. Questions, council?
Mayor, is that okay? Mm-hmm. Chad, just a couple of questions. Actually, first of all, thanks, Weston, for all the work on this. I think you struck a good balance in what you were trying to accomplish with the developers and the small density and the community benefit of having it look like that first slide.
Yeah, that's the goal.
And not the second slide. But I don't know if that was in Leighton. That might have been somewhere else.
That's Leighton.
No. Okay. Well,
unfortunately,
just a couple of questions. So back maybe to that second slide. What happens moving? I know this is moving forward. What happens to the issues that we've had in the past with this ordinance? So that's one question. And then second, maybe it relates with code enforcement moving forward. If you mentioned if there isn't a HOA established and you're saying, okay, well, great, we'll just have these, for instance, these four residences or these 4 properties should have been in an HOA. Now they're not. So we're going to do the maintenance or we're going to bill them. What if they say, you know what, still not going to pay, still not going to do? What recourse do we have at that point? So those 2 questions. Thanks.
So the first question, the ordinance already exists. This is a requirement on any property that has that rear frontage, or that's kind of a weird way to say that, the double fronts and arterial collector street. They have a rear yard that abuts that arterial collector. So the requirement already exists. That code is on the books. They are subject to that code today. What this does is it gives us some additional tools if for whatever reason we can't get that compliance. We would hope that through discussion and code enforcement, and for many of these, that's been enough. We've said, hey, we need you to go out there and chop the weeds down or replant some trees or whatever the case may be. But in those rare cases, there's a few of them, but in those rare cases where that's just not working, we have that additional ability to impose that fee and to go out there and maintain that. So they are required by law to comply with that code. They can't say we're not going to comply with your code. What this does is give us the ability then to impose a fee that would allow us to intervene and to go out there and provide that maintenance.
They still don't pay after that. So
if they don't, what are
we doing now then? What's the next?
Property,
yeah, is it
whatever the procedure is for a regular utility billing? Maybe that would be something to answer. But there'd be a process that we could go out and collect that fee.
So we place it on their utility bill, and they must pay it as any other item on the utility bill. So if they fail to pay their utility bill, they get their water shut off.
Okay, just case in point, if you look at this photo here where there's no home built there and there's probably no services that you would add to the monthly bill. At that point, Gary, could you lien the property to make sure that these folks take care of it?
Yeah, what we would do at that point, it becomes a debt of that property owner. Mm-hmm. And we would go after that debt, reduce it to a judgment, and then put a lien against the property for the amount of the debt. The same way we would, well, you don't have water being used by a vacant lot.
Yeah, and that was my case there.
So yes, we would reduce it to a lien, a judgment to a lien, and then same way we would for any other collection. So
one other thing that we've done that's outside of the ordinance is we've changed our processes in relation to the installation of these buffers up front. So that's been tightened up to make sure that that we don't have people. The buffer itself is required to be installed by the developer as part of the development of the subdivision. So we've made some changes in our policies and procedures, and also with our new online building permit tracking software that puts a hard stop on certain processes to make sure these are in place before they get too far along. So we hope that first step of changing those policies and procedures will keep those from not being installed in the first place. We might still have some issues with maintenance down the road, but we hope that'll fix that problem.
Okay. Thank you, Chad. Councilman Bloxham.
Yeah. So the ordinance has already been on the books since 2002. The fee is new.
The fee is new. Yep.
So when I was going back through the discussion in the Planning Commission minutes, I had the same question as this, and the answer from the staff was the fee section can be retroactive to those who are already not maintaining the buffer and are non-compliant with the current code. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll tag team with Gary on this one,
okay.
But yes.
So they can be subject to a fee that was not in place retroactively for their non-compliance.
Yeah, so the obligation existed. When you say retroactive, we can't go back and bill for anything in the past.
Okay.
But what we can do is say, this isn't working.
Right.
It's not being maintained. And so we will impose a standard and a requirement. And from this point forward,
okay.
and we do that in many.
So the retroactive standard is to say these people have not been in compliance for a long period of time, which is what I read in the actual ordinance. But the dollar figure starts when the fee is implemented today.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't go back in time. To your point, it's not retroactive in that manner.
Okay.
This
Council?
is through code enforcement. Is that how that will work?
That's where it'll start.
That's where it'll
Certainly,
start.
we'll have to go through if we come to a point where code enforcement's not enough, then the next step would be for us to go through a process to figure out what that fee would be. It's going to depend on the number of lots in the subdivision, the cost of maintenance, the length of frontage, what that would require. But sometimes installation would be a part of that upfront fee. So,
thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a bit of a different question. So it's been stated in the work meetings and also tonight that it's a last resort for the city to come in and impose the fee and then take care of it. And I know that there is some leeway for where there are not enough properties perhaps to have an HOA. But what if there are a small number of homes that the HOA is just, too much? It's a big burden or whatever. Is there any not leeway, but any encouragement, or the city will work with a group of homeowners who want to come together and allow the city to do that for them? They'll pay the fee, but where it doesn't seem like it's a punitive thing. I mean, because this is last resort, but what if they say, yeah, we want the city to do this and we're willing to pay that fee? Is there a way for them to come to you without it becoming the last resort? Does that make sense?
yeah, I think we'd want to work with people first. That's the first goal, is to see if they can. I think what the intent of this is for them first to be able to organize themselves and try to keep that fee as low as they can through competitive bidding, through a landscape contractor or whatever the case may be. As far as them coming to the city to maintain these, we're not interested in the city maintaining. So our process would be very similar to what they would go through. We'd go out and solicit bids. We'd say we got to divide this cost up by whatever the number of lots are that are in the subdivision. There would have to be some type of administrative fee because we would be having to keep track of these every month and issue the utility bills. Our guess is that is going to be more. And I say guess, this is an educated guess. We've sought for bids from landscape contractors and looked at that divided by the number of lots for a few different scenarios. And so we believe that that's probably going to be more expensive for the city to do that than for them to just organize together as a group of homeowners and provide that service themselves. I hope that answered the question. I don't know that we have any type of what's the right word, assistance necessarily available or planned, but as they buy those lots in that subdivision, they should be aware that there is an obligation for maintenance of that landscaping through their covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and just through the title report that goes on during the purchase of the home. And also, this will be one of the other things we've added is more clarity on the plat. There will be specific plat notes that describe exactly what is required and reference back to code, so that when people look at a subdivision plat in the purchase of the home, they can say, okay, there's this plat note, and I need to understand what that means. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Mayor? Oh, go ahead.
So you mentioned an instance where maybe an HOA wasn't formed, and looking at this picture, you say the ones that the buffer is closest to, we would bill, when in actuality the whole development has a responsibility for that. Would you bill the entire development that should be under that HOA?
Yes. Yeah, the intent would be that everybody that's under that obligation, which is the entire development, not just those. That's been one of the issues with having them in a private easement, is trying to, convince people that you have an obligation, even though this is not a part of your property and it's not part of a common area. So this is trying to close that gap. That's one of the reasons we're recommending that we no longer allow those in private easements to avoid that situation in the future. But that would be an obligation on everyone in the development. It's actually written in the code that way now, that it's an obligation of the development, not just of those abutting property owners.
Maybe that would encourage the HOA formation. So,
yeah, definitely. That's what our hope is.
Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to add to what Chad said, if that's okay. And what's driving this is really, well, I'll frame it this way. Most of the issues in this area have resulted because the HOAs were not properly established by the developers to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so, in addition to the ordinance proposal to change, is what Chad talked about in terms of the staff's review and critique of those CC&Rs when they come to us, and our ability to write ourselves in as a partner for the purposes of the creation and the dissolution, potentially, of the HOAs is really, really significant. So under the code, the applicants without our approval or the developers don't have the ability to say, or the residents afterwards to say, well, we just don't want to be an HOA anymore. So what this is not the provision of an alternative to the HOA. The HOA is the alternative, but we're dealing mostly with 3 or 4 horses that are already out of the barn, and we're trying to not only close the gate on future ones, if that analogy works, but also to do a little spruce up of the barn itself, right? And where there have been intentional or unintentional manipulation of those regulations to be able to circumvent the proper creation of the HOA, we're closing those now, both by ordinance and by staff policy and a better, more thorough review of that. So what we think will happen is, and to Tina, I think to your question, staff does not intend to say to the developer or to an HOA, well, if you don't like to do it through the HOA, you can come to the city and petition us, and we're happy to accommodate. That's not about this. This is about situations where we have currently, where there are, let's say in a 3-phase subdivision, phase 1 and phase 2 were properly set up. Phase 3 wasn't properly set up by the developer, but yet the improvements were put in. And then as the HOA or the developers went back to the residents and said, okay, you're in phase 3, you need to join the HOA, create your own or join an HOA with 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. We have some residents who are saying, no, my landscape's being taken care of. I'm just fine, thank you. Even the phase 1 and 2 HOAs have said, we'd love to have you come in. We'll charge you the same fee. We already have a contractor that's coming out every weekend to take care of this. We'll just take care of yours as well. And we have residents, some who are saying, yes, sounds great, but others are saying, no, thanks. I like the idea of receiving this benefit and paying. In those situations is where we'll approach them and say, Mr. Jensen, you have this obligation that Gary's talked about and Chaz talked about as part of the purchase of your lot. That's something the developer committed to, and you inherit that as the purchaser of the lot. So in your case, you have the choice. One is you can join with the HOA that already exists. They've welcomed you in. We've had those discussions with them. Or if you insist otherwise, then the city has the ability to for that fee. So the incentive is to help them to take advantage of the structure that already exists. Again, the problem has existed because the developers didn't set it up properly, and then there's no legal recourse for the HOA to go back and force those people to come in. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we think has a very narrow, a fairly narrow application. Most HOAs, Chad, you correct me if I misstate this, that are properly set up and the developer stays in long enough and gets the bylaws put together, most of those function well. It's when there's been a kind of a half-hearted approach to it or negligence, that's when it really can become a problem. And again, you can count them all in one hand. We all know where they are, that are generating 99% of these issues. So I don't, personally, you guys can disagree, but I don't think this is going to be an ongoing issue what we've had in the past if we just close these gaps, both in policy and by the ordinance, and then educate people. And the citizens, many of them we've met, Gary and Chad have met neighborhood meetings and evenings with people on every side of the issue trying to encourage a cooperative approach to solve this on their own. And if these handful of cases, it simply hasn't happened. So that's why we've come to this place. But we think it'll quickly come back into to order, if you will, and shouldn't be an issue going forward. Any feedback on that, Chad?
That's exactly right. I think it's a handful right now. Most of them look like this. Most of them are very well maintained, some version of this, but there are a few exceptions that we're just trying to close that loop.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Are there any comments from our audience? Keep in mind that this is a public hearing and we prefer your comments to be brief. Again, state your name for the record.
Just a minute. Tom Tudor, 1757 Gregory Drive, Leighton, Utah, 84041, 801-773-5155. Yeah, y'all probably now know me by now. The retired cop that respects the people, the voters. Okay, and I respect all of you. And I want to throw into you, you're perfectly right. I'm the police officer and the detective that had to go to all those kind of houses because the sheriff had to go there for 30 days by law and not get anybody. Oops, knock something out here. And I would like to be invited to one of your legal and law meetings because I'm the one that had to take them all to the Davis County Jail because they wouldn't pay their monthly fees and they would hook up water to other houses and cheat and things like that. So for 20 years, I could come one of your little meetings already read out because I've done meetings at Leighton High School for them. For a lot of information. That's why I come here and take notes, because I know the people after working here 52 years.
Okay, thank you.
And that's about it.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, if you ever want me at a meeting to let you tell you about what really goes on, call me up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak upon the topic? Okay, if not, I'll bring it back to the council for some action on item number B of our public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the proposed amendments to Leighton City Municipal Code, Title 19 Zoning, Title 19.05 General and Specific Development Regulations, Section 000, Tables 5-1 and 5-2, and Section 30, requirements specific to residential and agriculture zoning, landscaping and fencing, Section 40, transitional landscape and fencing, and Section 90, landscape requirements for arterial streets, Ordinance 22-01.
And we'd like to, if we can include in that motion, those changes we talked about, the grammatical and typographical changes.
And Tyson, you skipped a line.
Did I skip?
Yeah.
Districts.
Yep, that line.
Do you want me to start over?
No. just accept the
as written.
As written, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that we adopt ordinance 22-01. I'll take a roll call vote on this. So I'll start down there with Mr. Thomas.
Yep.
Councilmember Edmonton Smith Edmonton.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Bloxham.
Aye.
And Councilman Robert.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Let's go ahead and now go down to our final item of our public hearing, which is a rezone request. And once again, Mr. Chad Wilkinson will present this to us.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is our last item on the public hearings tonight. This is a zone change proposal at 178 West, 2675 North. This is a zone change request from CP2 to M1. The property's shown there on the screen in red, kind of up on the north end of the city toward Hill Air Force Base. This shows the property outlined here in yellow. The existing zoning of CP2 is shown in red. The adjacent zoning of M1 is that gray. That's the proposed zone. The M1 zone is an industrial zone. CP2 is more of a commercial retail type of a zoning. You can see to the north we have an existing mobile home park. Also to the south, some additional property zoned commercially and then some more mobile homes. Properties to the east are zoned industrial, which is what the applicant's proposing. Just to show the property, if you remember, this was part of a recent subdivision amendment that the council just barely approved to adjust the common property line. That little property line is still shown there, but that would expand that property just by a little ways to provide for some additional building area. The applicant's desire is to build some industrial flex buildings on this particular lot, which is an appropriate use for that M1 zone. This is an area that's identified in our general plan for industrial flex. That is exactly in conformance with our general plan designation for that property. So we have reviewed this. Again, this is that plat you just approved. We have reviewed this request. The Planning Commission has also reviewed the request and unanimously recommends approval of this change from CP2 to M1. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions, Council?
Yeah, and we've had this meeting. I just want it said for the record, but on the left is a church. On the right is a school. Now they're open fields, so the kids, I assume, on the school side go and play. On the church, I'm not so sure. So what, help me out, what do we have that'll protect us that this M1 doesn't slide into an M2 kind of?
Well, this is the zone change is what protects that. It's a zone change to M1.
That's a start.
So that can't change to M2 without further council action.
Right. Yeah.
So this M1 zone is our lighter industrial of the two industrial zones. It is consistent with the general plan. Some of these religious and educational uses are allowed in a variety of zones, including some of our industrial and commercial zoning districts. Sure. As far as the protections, there'll be buffer requirements along the perimeters of these properties. In the case of a church or a school use within the industrial zone, however, it's one of those inherent conflicts that we sometimes have. We'll have some landscape buffers along there. However, you've got some big space between the two uses there that'll provide somewhat of a buffer. We'll also have those landscape buffers provided in that area, but it's not a non-conforming use, but it is a little bit of a unusual use to have in that zone. But again, this is an appropriate use. Whether it was industrial or commercial, we'd still have those same transitional buffers required.
Right, but you also mentioned permits, like when you go to get your business license. There's things that they check out.
We would check the parking. We would check the use to make sure it complies with that M1 zoning.
Right, you would check.
We'd check compliance of the zone of the landscaping to make sure it's still functioning the way it's supposed to. If they've let things go for whatever reason, we require them to bring that back up to code.
Make sure they stay in an M1 zoning.
Yes, they can't change that M1 zoning.
Yeah, no, I understand they can't. A lot of people do things they can't do.
So I think I understand your question now. The uses they'll have to comply with that M1 zone, which we will check at business licensing.
My only concern is you got the school there, and then you have the church, which I don't know what they use that property for, but you have the ability of kids to be able to be around that.
Yeah, those uses are carefully monitored at the business license process. They can only use those. Yep.
You to say, so everyone else could hear.
Madam Mayor, do you mind?
Yes.
Councilman Thomas, I had the similar question. Can you just give me some ideas of what would be an acceptable use in M1 that would not be allowed in CP2?
M1 allows more light manufacturing type uses. Could be some more industrial type uses rather than the CP2. CP2 was recently changed to have those light flex. This would allow things like outdoor storage, though, as part of a use potentially. It doesn't get into those heavy manufacturing uses like an M2 would allow, but you could have potentially like a contractor storage yard that would allow some outdoor storage of materials with proper screening. There's still requirements for screening.
Bring that up.
And
Fencing.
and landscaping and fencing. Yeah.
I know we aren't to the site plan, and this is a zone change. Do we have any idea what the intent for the parcel is?
It's flex industrial space, so it would be individual spaces that would be flex warehouse office type buildings is what they've indicated to us.
Any other questions?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yep.
That school is a charter school.
Yeah.
I believe. I mean, I don't know that people are walking, kids aren't walking to that school. They're driven to that school, I would.
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there's no more questions from the council, I'll open it up to the public. If anyone would wish to make a comment regarding item C of our rezone request, please state your name and address for the records.
Name is J.D. Whitaker. Address is 1909 South Bluff Road, Syracuse. I am the applicant on record, and thought it was kind of exciting to get a couple of questions. We haven't even had a lot of discussion up to this point, but I thought some of the questions were insightful relative to the just proposed uses. And we've had kind of a general question of what an industrial flex use would be. I can provide some specific insights for us and the specific plan for this property. I think that the biggest distinction between a CP2 and an M1 is the ability to, which has already been mentioned, to actually have a secured contractor yard. The ability to essentially, if you maybe really just the ability to secure a yard where maybe you have a subcontractor with a fleet of vehicles, and you want to have the ability to lock that up. I think that's going to be the biggest driver as far as I think overall there's also measures in the permitting process that requires an attractive facade on the buildings that are already in place, as well as in this specific area, there's some CC&Rs in place that also even further restrict automobile storage as far as prohibiting junkyards, but that's probably already covered in the zoning. But I think overall there's existing restrictions that help the city that are already in place, that help the city accomplish, a good community and a clean property and an attractive use of the particular property. Overall, it's the intent is to build high quality professional office space that also allows subcontractors to have a simple warehouse storage option as well as a contractor yard. And it's that real driver of that contractor yard that's the distinction between the M1 zoning and the CP2 that opens up that option. So hopefully that provides a little clarification on kind of what we'd be seeing from that property in the future should we receive a recommendation or approval for a M1 zoning. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate what you said. No, you're fine. I didn't want you to do anything different than anybody else. That was not. I trust you. I trust it's an M1. That's what you'll do. My only concern was that others, which I had to find out myself, understand that there's still ongoing things that make sure that stays in M1. And the only reason I did that is because you got all these kids here up against the fence. And I wasn't sure with the church, but the kids, they're all out there playing in the field. So they're going to be up against that fence. And I just wanted to make sure that there was checks going on, that nothing got there that was not good. And I didn't mean to make you feel like you needed to get up, and because I totally trust the system. I just wanted, with me, I was thinking, what if? And the what if was taken care of. But thank you.
Great.
Appreciate
Wonderful.
it.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the topic? Seeing that there's none, Council, I'll bring it back to you for action on Ordinance 22-04.
Mayor, I move that we approve Ordinance 2204.
I have a second. It was seconded by Bettina. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. And once again, since it's a public hearing, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. I'll start out with Councilman Bloxham.
Aye.
Councilman Roberts.
Aye.
Councilman Smith Edmonton.
Aye.
Okay, Councilman Thomas.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
I just want to thank you for, we worked on this to add that industrial flex part, something that Tim was all over before he left. I think it's added something to what we can do with land use here in the city. So I vote aye, but thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes our public hearing. So Council, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing. And if there's no other unfinished business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn as well.
I move that we close the public hearing and that we close the public meeting.
And I second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for those that have stayed here the whole time, and I wish everyone a good evening.